We're going to run through the seller agreement forms now. So taking a listing as a listing agent. And hang on for a quick ride because there's a lot to cover and I don't want to keep you here very long. But let's make sure again that we're making sure that these are filled out properly and completely, and that we're not leaving blank spots on the contract. So starting with the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, making sure that the company name is in there properly, Prime Real Estate Experts LLC, and the seller's names, the way they appear on title are there. So do a little bit of homework, make sure you understand what the names are like on title. This can be particularly important if you're dealing with a property that is in a trust, making sure that the complete full name of the trust is there. Or if you are looking at a property that has multiple owners of the property, that all names are there. In terms of the listing, your name here, and then the expiration date for the listing. Make sure again, this is the expiration date, not today's date. Property description, address. It's also be good if you include the tax ID number. Brokerage fee. Our standard fee is 6%. If you've negotiated a different amount, then obviously that needs to be put in here. If you are working with our transaction coordinator and wish to have them pay the transaction coordinator costs as well, please make sure that that is noted here for the brokerage fee to cover your transaction coordinator. Then making sure that you have marked here if it is a dollar amount or a split percentage of the buyer for the buyer agent commission, and make sure that your seller understands that whatever amount is placed here as the brokerage commission and this amount here are not added together for a sum total. If this is 6% and this is 3%, then you know that you're getting 3%, the other half of the 6%. If this is 6% and you put 2% here, they need to know that you're receiving 4% as their agent and the buyer agent is receiving 2%. It's not an add these two together. Protection period, please make sure a number is in there. Even if you choose not to have a protection period, at least put a number 0 in there. Make sure everything is initialed properly, making sure they understand the terms of a limited agent. You must disclose where you obtained the square footage information for the property. And it is a check one, not check all. Most commonly used are going to be the county records, property tax records. Occasionally, if an appraisal has been done on the building, on the property, appraisal, building plans, if it's a listing for a home that was recently completed, building plans may be available, or other. If you used a prior MLS listing for your square footage data, you must mark other and state prior MLS listing. Make sure they understand everything they're going to be providing to you. Attachments are or are not. Again, the most common type of attachment to this is going to be if they are already in some kind of relationship with a potential buyer for the property that they want excluded from the contract, that would be stated. Or if there is some type of easy out clause that some of our agents have been using. If you have not, the home has not sold within X number of days, the seller may cancel the contract and pay a predetermined fee to cover our costs in having created the listing. Foreign investment in real property tax, you must disclose that the seller is or is not a foreign person as defined in the Internal Revenue Code. Foreign person being someone who is foreign national. If they are in the United States on a visa, such as a student visa or any type of visa that is not a work visa, then they need to check with their attorney to make sure how they should mark that. If they are a foreign-born national and are here with a alien registration or have been naturalized citizen, they do not need to mark this. Your sellers need to understand that if they are a foreign national that is here on some visas and some types of statuses where they are not a permanent long-term resident, they could be held responsible. They will be held responsible for taxes upon the sale of the property. Again, making sure everything is properly initialed, all signatures and dates, and you need to make sure you sign right here. You don't have a live contract. You don't have an executory contract without it. Make sure it is signed and dated. This contract under the attachment section does refer to the wire fraud alert disclosure. This is the only form that is used for buyers and sellers exactly the same way. Wire fraud alert disclosure, agency name, your name, and the seller's names. And this is simply disclosing to them to, as you know, are aware, to be safe with their any wiring instructions they receive. It's best at the time of taking a listing to have the seller complete the seller property condition disclosures. Seller name, property address, brokerage name. It is the seller's responsibility to complete this, not yours. Seller must understand that. Seller is responsible for going through and completing it. And then you need to make sure that all seller's initials are on each page. Every line is answered appropriately. Yes, no, or not applicable. The ownership data is complete at the top. And then yes, no, or not applicable. Make sure everything has an answer. If you choose to leave this with them, that's fine. You need to get it back in a timely manner. This must be provided once an offer is received. Get this done before offers come in. It's less stressing. Any place that they need to have any kind of explanation, make sure the explanation is neat and complete. This is available in digital format on the MLS. They can fill it out that way. And as they type, it will automatically fill in with adequate space. Again, make sure everything is filled out properly. Square footage or acreage, you must disclose again where you went to get square footage information for the property. County records, appraisal, building plans, other. Again, if you used MLS, please, you must mark other and explain you got it from the MLS. Seller then signs and initials, last page. Lead-based paint disclosure. We reviewed this on the lead-based paint section. Make sure that this is complete and correct. The MLS listing exclusion form is to protect you. Oftentimes we're working with sellers who are getting the home ready, but it's not ready to list at the time you take the listing. This is to protect you from any trouble with the MLS. You can sign the listing agreement. However, under the agreement, it must be on the MLS within 24 hours unless stated otherwise. This allows you to then to help your client understand that we're getting the paperwork done now while we get pictures and documents and everything else ready, and we can submit it to the MLS later. Address, seller name, the contract date and expiration date, your name, and your listing office ID number. The listing office ID number is not the license number that you use to represent the agency. The listing office ID number is the office ID number that is on the MLS. We're going to stop share for a moment so we can go over to our MLS again. If you need to know where the listing, how to find the listing MLS number, we're going to go search, office, type in prime real estate experts. You'll notice there are two. When you view the results, this ID number that appeared. So when you go to search, office, type in prime real estate experts, view results, this number 71487 is the listing. Once you go into search, office, prime real estate experts, and you see prime real estate experts here, 71487 is the listing ID number the office ID number that needs to go on the form. If you're with the founders branch, it's this ridiculously long, randomly assigned number that when we receive that number, even the folks at the MLS giggled because it's so ridiculously long. This is not the license number. This is the MLS listing ID number. Going back to this form, you then explain to the client that what this is allowing us to do is if there is a specific date they want the listing to go live, you can mark this and make sure that everything is ready by that date. If they're still doing preparation work, my recommendation is do not submit the property until the listing is publicly marketed. That's more open-ended for you. The key term here is publicly marketed. If you in any way publicly market this property, putting a sign on the property, mentioning on social media, any type of public information, this property must be active on the MLS within 24 hours or you are out of compliance and you will be fined, and the fine keeps going up. Occasionally, you will see sellers who are not going to list on the MLS. This is if you're working with an investment type of property that is going to be marketed directly to investors rather than on the MLS. Please note, sellers must sign and you must sign as the agent, and you are obligated to send this to the MLS within 5 listing business days of the listing agreement. If this is not turned in and you start a listing, put an agreement listing contract date in, and the date that you go live is greater than 5 business days, and the MLS audits the file, you will be fined for being out of compliance for not having this form either turned into them or having this live within the required 24-hour period. This is to protect you. The fine starts at $250 and goes up from there, doubles each time from there. So you don't need that kind of expense. Finally, the affiliated business agreement disclosure. This is the same as used with buyers. This is a company required form regarding the use of Ultimate Home Lending or Real Advantage Title Insurance, both of which Prime Real Estate Expert has an ownership interest in, that the seller can use any title company they choose to work with. Our recommended company is Real Advantage. We do not receive any advantage from that. The last form that you will work with a listing. If you start a listing and save it as incomplete, the residential input form will fill itself out. So let's go over to the other screen for a moment. On the MLS, forms, URE Legacy Form Library, residential listing input form. This is how you can get a blank form. If the property has not been on the MLS before, you are going to have to fill this out by hand. If the property has been on the MLS before and you start a listing and then save it, the information from the prior listing will autofill, and then it's a matter of going through with your seller and verifying the information is correct. A recommendation, when you get down to the features, for the features area, only mark the ones you want to use, and I recommend you then highlight them as well, so that as you're completing the listing, they stand out. When you get to the list of inclusions and exclusions, right here, starting on this side, do not mark include or exclude. That gets too tough. My recommendation is to highlight include anything that's being included and then line through exclude for remaining marks, but make sure that it's filled in. Highlight what's being included, typically in yellow. If there are specific inclusions or something you want to stand out, highlight those in another color so they stand out as an exclusion, and then you're not having to run your eye down the whole list again as you fill it out. Remember, everything has to be initialed. Remarks and agent remarks and exclusion remarks should be initialed. We may not always have time to fill in the remarks. It's best practice if you're not going to be able to write out the remarks right then. Explain to the client, I'm taking notes in these areas of what to include. I will be sending you an email with the remarks so that you can approve the description prior to me posting this live. Then make sure this form is complete and initialed and as necessary. A lot of documents to run through. Again, neatness, completeness, and because of the number of check boxes there are on the listing input form, I always recommend you highlight anything that is marked that you need to have your eye see to make sure you are adequately and accurately transferring that information to your actual listing.